They left a destitute young woman in a burlap bag to perish, but the rancher's little girl murmured, "Papa, she's my mama. Western Wyoming." Early autumn of 1892. The dawn light emerged faint amid a haze of amber and crimson foliage, the breeze crisp with the hint of coming ice. In the modest frontier settlement of Red Willow, quiet dominated the lanes before sunrise. Past the town stretched Jack Rollins's humble spread, tucked against a backdrop of sagebrush and scattered evergreens. Jack Rollins moved at a leisurely pace along the furrowed boundary, inspecting slats and uprights. At 33, he was trim and reliable, his features etched by exposure to sun and gusts. Following his wife's passing, he had grown sparing with speech, dwelling simply alongside his daughter, Sadie. At 4 years of age, Sadie trailed next to the mount, her tiny boots grinding in the dawn grit, her exhalations forming gentle vapors in the chill. They neared a cluster of sycamore trees, their yellowed fronds glinting in the glow. Beneath one twisted base rested a form partly concealed by dropped leaves and exposed roots. Jack pulled up his steed. Sadie paused, gripping the reins. Jack swung down, gaze sharpening. The form was a coarse burlap bag, aged and discolored. He crouched and swept away foliage. The bag displayed somber stains, blood. His pulse raced. He peeled back the upper fold and looked within. His breath hitched. Inside lay a youthful woman, slack, her wrists bound, marred flesh visible on her limbs and countenance. Her locks were matted, her visage ashen. She appeared to have been discarded there like refuse. Sadie remained mute at Jack's back, diminutive digits pressed to her mouth. Jack's heartbeat pounded. Sadie's tone, tiny and insistent, shattered the hush. "Papa, she's my mama." Jack stiffened. He gazed at Sadie, then at the stranger. In that instant, Sadie's fancy, the tales Jack had shared of her mother, and the vague, foggy recollections Sadie held, all merged. That woman's ebony tresses, her soft palms, her eyelids. For a split second, Sadie truly thought she beheld the parent she scarcely recalled. Jack's jaw clenched. He hoisted the woman with care, sliding his jacket under her to shield her from coarse timber. Sadie mounted up behind him, pressing her face into his spine. They headed back to the homestead. News traveled fast. By midday, locals assembled, propping against barriers, exchanging murmurs. Mrs. Turner arrived earliest. Jack Rollins hauling in lost livestock or mischief this go-round? Jack bore the woman into the stable. He placed her tenderly on an extra pallet. Sadie lingered nearby, wan and observant. A local shouted, "You discovered her in a sack." "That's risky dealings. Turn her over to the authorities." Jack pivoted, tone subdued yet resolute. "She's not alert yet. None of you know her story. Don't condemn her before she can defend herself." Whispers spread. Some residents fidgeted restlessly. A fellow spat onto the earth. Others gulped nervously. Jack said nothing further. He closed the stable entrances. Within, he hung a lamp, administered sips of water gently, draped her in quilts. Sadie crept to the pallet, straightening the covers over the injury-speckled limbs. Beyond, voices escalated. She could be a fugitive. Perhaps she's an escapee. Jack Rollins should surrender her. Jack positioned himself in the entryway, eyeing the expressions. He stayed wordless, hands tucked in pockets, posture firm. Sadie darted behind him, grasping his trouser leg. As twilight fell, the stable grew still. The woman remained insensible. Sadie perched at the pallet's end, plaything in her grasp. She murmured, "Mama, mama," into the fading illumination. The utterance lingered among them like an invocation. Jack strode amid the enclosures, attuned to the breeze shaking the panels. He refused to call the sheriff for now. He would safeguard her until she stirred. The villagers would pass judgment. Gossip would circulate. But this evening, in the shade of the sycamore cluster, a shattered woman rested secure beneath his shelter, not as an encumbrance, but as a soul deserving compassion. Western Wyoming. 2 days on, the serenity of Jack Rollins's ranch was disrupted by mutterings and footsteps, grinding the pebbled trail. A group of a dozen residents clustered beyond the barrier, expressions taut with worry and doubt. Some rested on fence rails. Others kept arms folded across heavy overcoats. In the midst stood Deputy Harmon, his brim dipped over his brow, lips drawn in a stern crease. "You've got to allow us to claim her, Jack," he declared. A woman turns up in a bloodied bag, pummeled nearly to death, and now she's sheltered in your home. That's a mountain of hassle for a lone man and his kid." Jack loomed tall on the veranda, arms crossed. His gaze was composed, inscrutable. Sadie peered from behind his limb, clinging firmly to his trousers. "She hasn't even come to yet," Jack stated evenly. "You haven't listened to her words. You don't know her identity. Don't judge someone you've never encountered," Mrs. Turner barked. "You've got a daughter, Jack. Consider her well-being." "I am," he responded. "And I'm thinking of hers, too." He nodded toward the barn. The crowd grumbled. Deputy Harmon's brow creased, but after a moment he stepped back. "You'll be held responsible for whatever happens." Jack gave a single nod. "I always am." Inside the barn, quiet returned. The girl still lay pale and still on the mattress. Jack had moved to the corner near the stove. A gentle fire glowed, and the scent of warm broth filled the air. Jack sat beside her with a damp cloth, wiping her brow in silence. Sadie stood at the edge of the cot, her doll in hand. That evening the girl stirred. She gasped and bolted upright, eyes wide with terror. Her hands clutched the blanket as if it were armor. When she saw Jack, she shrank back, breathing fast and shallow. "Hey, hey," Jack said softly, holding up both hands. "You're safe. No one here is going to hurt you." She looked between him and Sadie, confusion clouding her bruised face. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her lips trembled. Jack reached into his coat pocket and drew out a folded cloth, pale blue with worn stitching. He held it out. "My wife used this," he said before she passed. "It's clean, soft, like peace." He placed it near her, not forcing it. "You don't have to remember everything. Just remember this. You're alive. That's what matters." The girl took the cloth slowly, clutched it to her chest, and curled sideways on the bed. Jack stood and walked to the door, leaving Sadie behind. That night, Sadie sat beside the cot, legs tucked beneath her. The firelight flickered over the girl's face. Sadie leaned close, brushing a finger along the girl's sleeve. "Mama," she whispered, barely audible. "Mama, you're home now." The girl did not open her eyes, but tears shimmered at the corners. The next morning, the girl was awake. She still said nothing. Jack gave her space, leaving a tin mug of warm water by her side and a plate of soft bread. Sadie brought a small wooden brush and handed it up without a word. Later, as the sun slanted through the barn window, Sadie sat on the floor beside her and asked gently, "What's your name?" The girl shook her head. I don't know." Sadie looked at her hair, tousled in dark, catching the red of the firelight. "Rosie," she declared, like the roses Mama used to press in her books. "Your hair is just that color." The girl blinked, startled. "Rosie?" Sadie nodded. "Yes, Rosie." Jack, overhearing from the doorway, didn't argue. He simply met the girl's eyes and gave a slow nod. "Rosie it is." That night, as the fire burned low and the wind whispered outside, Rosie lay on her side with the blue handkerchief tucked beneath her cheek. Beside her, Sadie curled up with her doll and whispered again, "Mama." Rosie let the tears fall silently into the pillow. She did not correct her. Western plains stretched gold under a sky the color of old tin. Jack stood beside a chestnut mare named Clover, reins loose in his hand. Rosie hesitated by the barn door, arms crossed, one foot drawing quiet circles in the dirt. "You don't have to," Jack said gently, nodding toward the saddle. Rosie shook her head. "No, I want to." The bruises on her face had faded to soft yellow. Her eyes still held shadows, but she stepped forward. Jack helped her mount slowly, steadying her leg. "That's it," he murmured. "Let her feel you, not fear you." He walked beside her as Clover moved at a careful pace. Rosie gripped the pommel tight at first, knuckles white, but after a few minutes her fingers relaxed. The first week they stayed close to the paddock. Jack never pushed. He walked with her every morning, adjusting the stirrups, reminding her to breathe. Sadie followed with a basket of apples for the horse. At night, Jack moved the wooden chair a little closer to the fireplace so Rosie would be warmer. He cleaned her bandages with practiced hands and never asked about the scars. Each morning, there was always fresh hot water waiting in the tin basin by her cot. And though there were only 2 mugs in the house, Heelways gave her the porcelain one, the one with the faded bluebirds his wife once used. Once she noticed her gloves mended with new thread. When she looked at Jack, he only shrugged. "To her easy," he said. Rosie began helping with small chores, gathering eggs, brushing the horse. Jack led her. Sadie trailed behind, chattering cheerfully, telling stories about the stars and her dreams. Rosie listened, smiled, and nodded, but rarely spoke more than a few words. One afternoon, Jack led Rosie further out, past the old willow tree into a wide field where the grasses waved like a golden sea. Clover trotted gently, and the wind lifted Rosie's hair. Suddenly, Rosie froze. Her fingers trembled on the reins, her breath caught. Jack looked up sharply. "Rosie!" Tears spilled down her cheeks before she knew they were there. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Her voice cracked. "I've been here before, or someplace like it. There was sun and grass. I remember a voice, a man's. I was on a horse. I laughed." She shook her head, confused and overwhelmed. It was warm. Jack stepped closer, but did not touch her. "That's something, a piece." "I do not know who I was with," she whispered, but I felt safe. Sadie, seated on the fence, slipped down and walked over. She reached up and patted Roz's back with her tiny hand. "It's okay, Mama," she said softly. "I remember for you." Rosie looked at the child, wide-eyed. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Jack saw it, the flash of emotion, deep and raw, and looked away to give her a moment. That night, Rosie sat by the fire holding the mended gloves in her lap. Jack poured her tea and left the mug beside her. No words passed, only the quiet comfort of shared silence. The girl in the sack had begun to fade. In her place, slowly Rosie was becoming someone real. Western frontier, deep into autumn. Night falls cold and sharp over the Rollins ranch. A chill wind howled through the valley as Jack Rollins stirred the last coals in the hearth. Rosie was asleep in the cot, her leg bandaged from a fall the week prior. Sadie, curled beside her, had long drifted into dreams, her little hand still resting gently on Rose's wrist. Then came the knock. Sharp, steady, not frantic, not hesitant. Jack moved to the door, revolver holstered at his side, and opened it just a crack. A tall man stood on the porch, coat flecked with dust, a polished silver star glinting on his chest. Even the man said, "Name's Darius Finch, detective out of Cheyenne." Jack didn't move. "What brings a city badge out this far? I'm looking for someone." A young woman, name unknown, escaped a children's home 2 weeks ago after it burned to the ground. They say she might have had something to do with it. Jack's gaze stayed steady. "Lots of women pass through these parts. Don't make them criminals." The detective's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This one's different," she ran. "That says something," Jack grunted. "It says she was scared." "Maybe." Finch stepped closer. "Or maybe she's hiding something worse." Jack didn't flinch. "If you've got a name or a face, come back in daylight." "Not tonight." Finch narrowed his eyes. "I hear she's injured, taken in by a rancher, a widower with a daughter." His gaze flicked past Jack into the dim cabin behind him. "That wouldn't be you, would it?" Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Finch gave a cold smile and tipped his hat. "I'll be back with a warrant if I must." Then he turned and vanished into the trees. Jack closed the door and bolted it. Behind him, Rosie stirred in the cot, her brow damp with sweat. "What was that?" she whispered, voice fragile. "Nothing you need to worry about," Jack replied, but his voice held an edge. The fire hissed in the hearth. Sadie slept on, but Rosie didn't. Later that night, when all was still, Rosie slipped from bed. She moved quietly, careful not to wake Sadie. She found Jack's old coat and her boots. The fear was back, pressing on her chest, tight and breathless. The detective's voice echoed in her head. She stepped outside into the night. The air was biting cold. The stars shimmered high above. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Couldn't risk putting Jack or Sadie in danger. Behind her, Sadie woke. The cot was empty. "Mama," she whispered. "Mama!" She ran to Jack's room, panicked. "Papa, she's gone!" Jack sat up, heart thudding. He rushed to the door, grabbed his lantern, and followed the small tracks in the frost. "Rosie!" he shouted into the night. "Rosie!" No answer. Sadie trailed behind him, her small legs trembling. The trail led toward the edge of the ridge, where the land dropped sharply into brush and broken rock. Jack held up the lantern. Then he saw it, a crumpled shape at the base of a slope. Rosie, he moved without thinking, scrambling down the steep incline. Rosie was unconscious, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. Dirt streaked her face. Her breathing was shallow. He knelt gently, gathering her in his arms. Her body was ice cold. Sadie sobbed at the top of the hill. "Mama, please come back." Jack looked up, then called softly, "Stay there, Sadie, I'll bring her back." It took nearly an hour to carry Rosie up the slope. Jack's muscles ached, but he didn't stop. Back at the ranch, he laid her by the fire and covered her in every blanket he could find. Sadie crawled beside her, holding her hand tightly. Rosie stirred once, eyelids fluttering. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. Jack brushed her hair back. "Don't be," he said. "You came back." "That's enough." Sadie leaned close, her voice soft. "Mama, please don't leave again." Rosie didn't reply, but a tear slid down her cheek. Outside, the wind howled over the hills. Inside, Rosie was home for now. And Jack knew they weren't just protecting her anymore. They were keeping their family whole. The storm had passed, but a colder one lingered inside the cabin. Rosie lay curled on the cot, swaddled in layers of wool and silence. Her face was pale, her lips cracked from cold and fear. Jack sat beside her, quiet, his eyes watching the flicker of fire light dance across her skin. He had not asked her why she left, not yet. Outside, Sadie sat on the porch steps, chin tucked into her knees, hugging a ragged old doll. Rosie stirred, her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. She looked around, confused at first, then alarmed. Her hands twitched as if to run again, but her leg betrayed her, bandaged, stiff, Jack noticed. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his voice low. "You're safe," he said. "You're home." Her breath quickened. I shouldn't be here." Jack reached over and poured water into a chipped tin cup, handing it to her. "You shouldn't be freezing in Aravine either," he said. "Drink." She hesitated, then took a sip. Her hands trembled. Jack set the cup down. Then he leaned back in the old wooden chair beside her. "I don't know what they said to you," he began, "or what you believe about yourself, but I saw what you did." Rosie looked up, her eyes wary. "What do you mean?" Jack folded his arms. His voice was soft but certain. "That night before you left, the creek swelled from the storm. One of the colts got out, fell in. You dragged it out. Risked your own life, your bad leg and all." Rosie's mouth parted in disbelief. "I saw it," Jack continued. "I was up near the shed. You didn't know anyone was watching." He paused, then said, "If you're a bad person, then you're the first bad person I've ever seen risk their neck to save a drowning horse." Roz's lips trembled. She turned her face away, ashamed. A tear rolled down her cheek. Jack leaned forward, gently dabbing the tear with a soft handkerchief, the same one his late wife once used. "I don't care who you used to be," he said. "All I know is you're the one my daughter trusts." His voice cracked slightly on that last word. Rosie began to cry in earnest, quiet, choking sobs that shook her frame. Jack didn't stop her. He just sat there, steady as the old pine walls around them. Moments later, tiny footsteps pattered across the floor. Sadie stood near the edge of the cot, holding the worn doll in both hands. Her voice was timid. "Mama, she told me to give this to you." Rosie blinked through tears, confused. Sadie walked closer, lifting the doll with great care. "My mama," she said softly. "Before she went to heaven," she said, "one day I should give this to someone brave and kind." Rosie reached out, almost afraid to touch it. Her fingers grazed the fabric, old but clean, her breath caught in her throat. Sadie leaned in, hugging her gently. "That's you!" Rosie wrapped her arms around the child, clutching her and the doll to her chest. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Jack's voice answered from the chair. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean it isn't yours." Outside, snowflakes drifted like ash over the land. Inside, a fire crackled, warm and patient. For the first time, since waking in a sack under the sycamore tree, Rosie felt something shift, soft and dangerous, and beautiful. Hope. Rosie sat alone beneath the cottonwood tree behind the barn. Her leg had healed, but her heart had not. The wind stirred through the branches like whispers from a life she had tried to forget. And now it was all coming back. She had been 10 when they brought her to Hollow Creek Orphanage, a bleak building at the edge of nowhere with broken windows and colder rules. The children never smiled. The adults rarely spoke except in commands. Years passed in silence and suspicion. She learned to keep her head down, her mouth shut. But the older she got, the more she noticed children disappearing in the middle of the night. New ones arriving with no names, no pasts, and no one ever asked questions until she did. "I found a ledger," she whispered one night to the wind, her hands gripping her skirt. In the attic, it had names, dates, payments. She'd been cleaning the warden's office, dusting behind the old desk when her fingers touched a loose board. Behind it, the book had waited. Handwritten pages, careful columns, initials she remembered from bedtime roll calls. When she confronted the matron, it was like lighting a match in a dry forest. They beat her, locked her in the cellar. Then, days later, the fire, it tore through the west wing of the orphanage. 2 children died. The newspapers called it a tragic accident, but Rosie knew better. It was a warning. She had buried the ledger at the base of an old tree, a twisted sycamore just beyond the fence. Then she ran, but they found her. "They thought I died," she murmured, voice shaking. "They wrapped me in a sack and dumped me like garbage." She hadn't meant to say it aloud, but Jack was standing nearby. She hadn't seen him approach. He didn't speak. Note at first. Rosie turned ashamed. Her hands trembled. "I should have told you, but I thought if you knew." Her voice cracked. "You'd send me away," she finished, barely audible. Jack knelt down slowly beside her. "You buried the truth," he said softly, "and they buried you for it." She looked at him, her eyes wide and full of tears. "It's not over. They'll come again." Jack didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for her hand. His fingers were rough, warm, steady. He didn't say he believed her. He didn't say he forgave her. He just held on, and that was enough. She broke then, fully and deeply, leaning into him like a dam, finally surrendering to flood. He wrapped his arms around her and held her as she cried, as the trees swayed, as the secrets she had carried for so long finally left her in ragged breaths. Inside the cabin, Sadie was coloring with broken crayons on a wooden plank. She looked up once toward the window. She saw Rosie and her father in the distance, not speaking, just holding each other. She smiled to herself, then returned to her drawing. It was 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, one in the middle with curly hair and a dress, a family outside. The wind picked up, and beneath the earth, buried deep at the roots of a gnarled tree, the truth waited in ink and paper and silence, waiting for the day Rosie would dare to dig it back up. But for now, she had something else, someone else, a place not just to survive, but to be believed, to be loved. Late afternoon, the wind heavy with storm. The knock came like thunder. Jack opened the door slowly. 2 men stood outside, one in uniform, the other with a badge pinned to a dark vest. Their horses were tied at the gate. The air between them and Jack held no warmth. "Jack Rollins?" the officer asked. Jack gave a quiet nod. "We've come for the girl. Name's Rosie Bellamy. We have a warrant issued from the state capitol. Arson, suspicion of manslaughter. She's to come with us." From inside, Rosie froze. The name, her name, echoed too loudly in her ears. She had known this day might come, but it still struck like lightning. Jack didn't move. "You're making a mistake," he said, voice low. The detective stepped forward. "That's not your decision. If she's innocent, she'll prove it in court." Jack turned to call for Rosie, but she was already at the door, standing behind him. Her eyes were wide but dry. There was a steadiness to her, born from nights without sleep and days carrying secrets. "I'll go," she whispered. "No," Jack said firm. Just then a small voice broke the tension. "Wait!" Sadie darted from the kitchen, still in her boots, clutching her ragged doll. She ran between Rosie and the lawman, planting her little body like a fence. "She's my mama," she cried. "Don't take her." "You can't!" The wind stilled. The air inside the cabin held its breath. The officers glanced at each other. Uncomfortable. One lowered his eyes. Behind them, footsteps approached from the dirt road. "Townsfolk were coming." Quiet at first, then more certain. Men, women, children, farmers, storekeepers, even the blacksmith's wife. They had seen the riders they had followed. Rosie stood stunned. Then from the crowd, a voice called out, "I know that girl," said an elderly woman with silver hair braided down her back. She stepped forward, cane in hand, spine straight. "I worked in Hollow Creek years ago. I know what they did." She pointed a finger at the detective. "That child is telling the truth." A murmur spread like wildfire. Heads nodded. Whispers turned into words. Words into conviction. The sheriff hesitated. Ma'am, that's not. You'll need more than ink on paper to steal her away from us. Now, the old woman snapped. Rosie looked to Jack, shaken, but he was already moving. He stepped forward, took her hand gently. Then, to the astonishment of all, he dropped to one knee. If the law needs someone to speak for her, let it be me, Jack said, voice steady, gaze locked on Rosie's. If she needs protection, I offer my name. If she needs a future, I offer my life. He pulled from his vest pocket a ring, simple silver worn with time. I'm not asking because of duty. I'm asking because I want this. I choose you. The sun broke through the clouds in that instant. Soft gold spilling over the hills. Rosie blinked back tears. The world around her fell away. In the center stood Jack on one knee. Sadib beside him, still gripping her doll. The town watching and the law waiting. She nodded. Yes, she whispered. The crowd exhaled. Someone clapped. A cheer began, cautious but rising. Even the officer cracked a small smile. Sadie beamed. See? She's ours. And that was how they stood, not as fugitives, but as a family, held together by more than names or records or laws. They were a family by choice, by love, by one brave little girl who had whispered the truth loud enough for everyone to hear. The winter passed with quiet resolve. Snow melted slowly from the ridges and green buds peeked through the earth like hope returning after exile. Rosie had been cleared. The investigation exposed layers of corruption at the Hollow Creek home. Witnesses came forward. The names she had buried beneath an old sycamore tree. Names in that leather-bound book matched the missing, the lost, the silenced. No one called her a liar anymore. And when the frost finally broke, Jack Rollins built a small arboret atop the hill behind the ranch near the same sycamore where it had all begun. It was Sadie's idea. This is where she came back to life, she said, eyes shining. So it was settled. The wedding would be there. On the morning of the ceremony, the town rose early. Someone brought quilts. Another strung up wildflowers on a rough wooden arch. The blacksmith carved two simple benches. Even the preacher hiked up the slope. Bible in one hand, cane in the other. Rosie stood at the base of the hill, breath caught in her throat. Her dress was plain cotton, ivory, sewn by hand with care. It had no lace, no train, but it shimmered in the sun like river water. Her hair was braided down her back. No veil, just honesty. Sade stood beside her, holding a bouquet of wild daisies and goldenrod. Her little boots kicked dust, too excited to stand still. You ready, Mama? She asked. Rosie looked at her, heart full. Yes, baby, more than ever. They walked up together, hand in hand. Jack waited beneath the sycamore in his best shirt, hat pressed to his chest. His eyes never left Rosie. The preacher raised his voice above the soft wind. Marriage, he said, is not the union of two perfect people. It is the promise of two imperfect hearts to stay when storms howl and rivers rise. It is standing firm side by side when the world says run. He looked at Rosie, then at Jack. I ask you now, do you choose this life, this bond, this love? I do, Jack said. I do, Rosie echoed, voice steady. The preacher nodded. Then by the strength given me and the truth lived between you, I pronounce you husband and wife. Jack stepped forward, cuped Rosie's cheek, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. You didn't just survive, he whispered, voice rough with emotion. You brought us back to life. Tears brimmed in her eyes. Sadie cheered, leaping into their arms. The crowd clapped. Some wiped their eyes. Others laughed softly. The wind swirled through the grass like a hymn. Later that afternoon, the three of them rode together down the hill. Rosie sat behind Jack, arms wrapped around him. Sadie sat on her own little pony beside them, giggling with delight. Mama, she called. Let's race, Rosie laughed, sunlight in her voice. All right, sweetheart, but don't go easy on me. The horses thundered into the field, past fences and flowers, through the open land where love had taken root. The past was not forgotten, but it no longer held them. Together they galloped toward the future, toward spring, toward the promise of every sunrise yet to come. If Rosie, Jack, and little Sade's story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Drop a comment below. What did you feel when Sadie whispered, Mama? Smash that hype button if you believe stories like this deserve to be shared far and wide. And make sure to subscribe to Legends of the Wild West stories for more tales of unlikely love, quiet bravery, and second chances in the rugged American frontier. We tell the stories, but you keep them alive. See you in the next one.